Grand Portage Resources' Herbert Gold Project in southeast Alaska highlights increased gold resource, indicated and inferred, of 860,000 ounces, in excess of 10 grams per ton gold. Expansion drilling is planned on the Herbert Gold property for the summer of 2019. Grand Portage Resources trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Thank you so much.
Kris, you've been talking about what the BC government might be putting in its upcoming budget. They're holding consultations. What have you asked them to do?
We've asked them to stop. As you mentioned, the Standing Committee on Finance is traveling around the province this month from town to town and city to city. And what they do there is the politicians on that committee sit around a big kind of a square table, and then they hear from people from those different communities. And usually what that involves is an organization, a group, or whatever, coming to the committee and saying, please fund this, please fund that, please pay for this. And some of them are really common sense solutions. For example, the CTF gave our presentation up in Quesnel, and the gentleman that was presenting before me, you only get 5 minutes to plead your case, the gentleman that was presenting before me was saying common sense things like, why don't you take the money that I'm paying for my hunting license and my fishing license and actually put that directly into conservation and wildlife management? Duh. So things like that, asking that certain costs of money be left aside to help certain industries. Things like hunting and fishing should go into, naturally, the preservation of wildlife and habitat, things like that. And then what we do as a CTF, we show up and we will usually say, please stop. There's all sorts of groups that want funding for all sorts of things. And our answer is government. More taxes and more spending isn't the answer to everything. So we go there and we plead with these politicians to please balance the budget, change ICBC into a competitive co-op so we can have a choice, stop blocking the Trans Mountain Pipeline, cancel the carbon tax, and lastly, we ask them for our top 5 to cancel the employer health tax. That would save job creators, our businesses, and also actually municipalities and property taxpayers a lot of money every year. So that was our taxpayer top 5. We really hope that the government will.
Now, of course, we know, depending on the stripe of the government, how often they listen to pleas to reduce taxes or to focus taxes on certain areas. For example, the carbon tax, perhaps people would be more comfortable with it if it went to things that would fund alternative things like more transit and expand transit services, right?
Yes, exactly. Back when we were first sold on this carbon tax idea here in British Columbia in 2008, politicians back then under the BC Liberals told us many things, like the carbon tax would stop at $30 a ton, that it would always be quote-unquote revenue neutral, which actually was a mostly meaningless term, that it would fund things like green technology, that it would create affordable alternative fuels that would be plentiful, that it would reduce CO2 emissions. And then also, lastly, they were even back then talking about things like a social license, that if we pay a carbon tax, it'll be a lot easier for us to get our resources out to market, i.e. things like the Trans Mountain Pipeline. None of those things is true. Not one. Our CO2 emissions are going up. There is a constant fight against pipelines. It's now $40 a ton, and they're not even calling it revenue neutral. So really all this is just a massive, massive tax grab. And it goes directly into general revenue. A lot of folks don't know that. They think that when they're paying through the nose at the pump for the carbon tax, or paying for their natural gas bill, in some cases the carbon tax being more expensive than the actual volume of gas they're using, the units of gas, a lot of folks think that money is somehow magically going into some cornucopia of green technology that's going to save the planet. But that's not true. It's fundamentally not true. It's just going into general government revenue, and our emissions are going up. So that is why we're asking the government to cancel it. And like you said, it depends on the stripe. Well, back when this was first being put through in BC, we had Carol James, who was then the leader of the NDP, saying that trying to call the carbon tax revenue neutral was akin to putting, quote, lipstick on a pig, end quote. And then John Horgan, who was sitting in the opposition benches, was pleading with the government to axe the tax. They were talking about the carbon tax. Now the NDP, once they're in government, seem to love it. We wish they'd reverse themselves again and be against it.
Well, is there any indication that carbon taxes anywhere have made a big difference and have funded things to get people out of fossil fuel burning vehicles?
No, this is the thing. It's innovation and humans that invent technology that replace out-of-date or unuseful technology. It hasn't been government. And so that is where we're trying to get people to realize that maybe it's easy if you're sitting next to a nice pretty park on a bench in downtown Vancouver and driving your electric vehicle. It may be easy for you to imagine that we've turned away from fossil fuels, so to speak, or that we're not using oil and gas. That's just fundamentally not true. I think it was Bloomberg that recently crunched some numbers and said that if we wanted to be zero net, completely off of fossil fuels in North America by the year 2050, it was a staggering amount of work that would need to be done. Something like one nuclear power plant would need to be brought online every day for the next couple of decades in order to replace the kind of horsepower that we get through oil and gas with things like electricity. It's just not going to happen anytime really soon. And it's important to continue to invent these things, but slapping a carbon tax on people going to pick up their groceries or drop their kids off at school or heat their homes isn't going to do it. It's never going to work this way.
I think the British Labour Party came out with something that said to meet the target goals for climate change, that people would have to be cut down to 10 hours of work a week.
Right. And a lot of people don't realize that. I think a lot of folks don't understand history. So if you go back even 150 years or so, you can see that productivity is lower, that food production is lower. A lot of reasons for that is actually malnourishment. In many cases, people couldn't actually consume enough energy, meaning eat enough food, in order to plant enough, to grow enough for themselves, which led to a lot of malnourishment, even in places that you wouldn't think of, places like Sweden. And so that's true. If you start cutting things down like this, you're going to wind up cutting down the productivity and the work times of people. When we invented the electric light, when people were able to heat their homes and light their homes after the sun went down, we just blossomed when it comes to production. Human beings have advanced exponentially since then, since the invention of the internal combustion engine and the electric light bulb. And so if we start scaling back and going backwards, we're going to wind up a lot poorer than we are now. And so we think that the answer always is innovation. Our vehicles and our fuels are getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And it's because of efficiency. It's not because of government. And so if we allow industry to continue to invent and innovate, this will take care of itself. Tech is the answer, not taxing.
Do you trust Prime Minister Trudeau when he says any profits from the Trans Mountain Pipeline will go to develop alternative energy sources?
Oh, that was one of the worst things we heard. So we were happy to hear for the second time that the federal government said the words that they support the twinning of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which is great. We're actually seeing some evidence of it, kind of, sort of, because we're seeing pipes now being stored and stacked up in places like the Fraser Valley and in Kamloops here in BC. But when we heard him turn around in the next gasp and say he wants to put any profits off the Trans Mountain Pipeline into green tech and or the sale of the future thing into green tech, that just sounds like more corporate welfare. And not just corporate welfare. We need to keep in mind that a lot of the corporate welfare that ruined Ontario's hydro prices was going into so-called green tech, with little to no oversight or accountability. So the idea of taking what could be a profitable money-making pipeline and twisting it into some sort of mutated green technology corporate welfare fund year after year with taxpayers' money, that just sounds like the worst-case scenario. You know, they already took billions of taxpayers' dollars needlessly and purchased the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Keep in mind, we had a private company begging and willing to do this twinning for 5 years straight, getting green lights, saying, help me, help you. We'll employ people, we'll build it as our property, no problem. And this federal government dragged the puck so long that the company basically threw its hands up and walked away, leaving us owning the darn thing. And now he's going to turn it into a slush fund for so-called green tech, where we're really, really worried about it.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp, MGI and the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected several high-grade gold intersections, including 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. Additional drill targets on the LH property have been identified by a 2018 drone airborne magnetic survey to further evaluate a pyrrhotite-enriched gold-bearing system. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, do we have any idea how much money various governments have spent fighting the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which won all but one court challenge?
That's a great question. We haven't tallied up the total yet, but it's in the millions of dollars, because you have to keep in mind that not only is the province of British Columbia fighting it, it means that the province of Alberta is dragged into the fight in order to help. It means also that different municipalities are also fighting it. So, for example, I know the city of Burnaby was fighting it. I tried doing an access to information or a freedom of information request there, and they claimed privacy, which is strange, because I wanted to find out how much money Burnaby taxpayers were forking over for that. Ironically, a lot of property taxes coming out of the Trans Mountain Pipeline are paid to the city of Burnaby, so maybe it canceled itself out. The short answer is millions of dollars, and we will eventually have the full tally. Unfortunately, the full tally isn't known yet because, as we've heard, the Premier of British Columbia, John Horgan, is now somehow, some way trying to fight it again. We'll have to see what his next move is in court. But at the end of the day, we need to be reminded there's only one taxpayer, and we're paying through the nose for this. Keep in mind also that the amount of federal tax money revenue that we're leaving on the table because we don't have pipeline capacity is staggering. We took the parliamentary budget officer numbers, so a completely non-partisan, straight as an arrow, down the middle, boring office in Ottawa. They crunched the numbers, and we took them and looked at them. Between the year 2013 and 2023, because we cannot get a fair and even price for our oil overseas, because we don't have proper pipeline capacity, we are losing out on nearly $13 billion. That's just in federal taxes. That's it. Not even touching provincial, not touching the actual salaries of these folks to be employed, and not touching municipal taxes. $13 billion. We could build 6 St. Paul hospitals and 9 Patello bridges for that amount of money.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after the break.
I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. to view our comprehensive company presentation, and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, have you had a chance to look at Conservative leader Andrew Scheer's policy on climate change and the environment?
What I've heard so far from it, I was touring a lot of BC this week, actually. I was up to Prince George and back, and we went to Quesnel to give our budget consultation. What I've heard from him very briefly is that he also wants to focus on taxes and not on technology and not taxes. And for that, we're hopeful. We've also heard that he's against the carbon tax. We need to keep an eye on the party because we want to make sure that they're not going to drift into the area of, we'll make it a revenue-neutral carbon tax. Number one, there's no such thing. Number two, when British Columbia tried calling it revenue-neutral, all they did was a little shell game in the BC budget document. And by that we mean they took in a whole bunch of money, for argument's sake, say $1 billion, called that the revenue-neutral carbon tax income. Then they shoved every random tax credit you could possibly imagine, from film tax credit to children's fitness tax credit, inside that box, made it balance to zero, abracadabra, revenue neutral. Basically all they mean by that is they'll take your money and then we'll spend it. That's basically what revenue neutral means. So we hope he doesn't start drifting down that road. We hope that the federal Conservatives stay on the same lines as, say, the Alberta Conservatives and the Saskatchewan Conservatives and say no carbon tax, period.
Would it be fairer to the average Canadian to up the personal tax exemption and get rid of all these various rinky-dinky tax credits that, when you add them up, don't really amount to much for the average person?
Yes, exactly. That would be much more fair. Some folks go all the way and say we should just have a flat tax, which is definitely something you could consider. But when it comes to things like what we call boutique tax credit, so as you just described, rinky-dinky, it's a good term for it. You'll wind up with children's fitness tax credits and old age tax credits and, you name it. Do I get to go to the gym and have a tax credit? Number one, that just involves government in your day-to-day life more and more, which is never a good idea. Number two, it creates more levels of bureaucracy. Three, it's the more tax credits and loopholes and possibilities you have, the more chances you're going to screw up there are. And then the CRA will come after you much more often because there's all these different loopholes and things that you might not be jumping through properly, different hoops you may not be jumping through. So yeah, it would be a lot smarter to just cut people's taxes, period, and quit with this boutiquing. But we know that boutique tax credits sell great during an election because then you can target different segments of the voters that you want and say, I'm here for you. I'll give more money to you. Frankly, we would like less government and lower taxes. So that's what we'd like to see.
Well, I just see delivered here on my telephone, the federal government has offered $275 million in support of LNG Canada's $40 billion liquefied natural gas development in northern BC. Why do they have to give private developers any money at all?
It's one of those strange things, right? We're against corporate welfare no matter what industry it is. We don't care if it's media, if it's oil, if it's whatever. You shouldn't be handing out corporate welfare. These companies should be allowed to make their own money and profit on their own. If they can't, well, they shouldn't be in business, or they should change their business model so that they are profitable. So that goes for things like Bombardier or a train maker or whatever you want to call it. They shouldn't need it. Now, if they're trying to give them tax exemptions or tax breaks, that's a little bit different. That means that they're just not taking the taxes from them. And if they need that as some sort of an incentive to get rolling or started so that they're giving them a tax break, that could be seen as a bit more different. But as far as just handing them taxpayer dollars, this has got to stop. And it happens way too often. Every single year when we tabulate how much corporate welfare is going out the door, it's staggering. Folks need to start paying attention, especially in their local ridings, and especially now. This summer, you're going to see members of parliament with bags of money, theoretically speaking, in their ridings, promising everything from, the Rod and Gun Club parking lot getting, repaved, or a new curling rink, or you name it. And then they're going to be starting to hand out corporate welfare to local businesses. That needs to stop. We can't have taxpayers just to be a big bank for everybody.
Kris, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you so much for caring about BC.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Her website, taxpayer.com. If you have any questions for Kris or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.